The Science of Selling by David Hoffeld. Picture yourself in a university lecture hall. A researcher puts up a simple black and white photo on the screen. Just a man in a suit, maybe late 50s, with a calm, neutral expression staring back at you. The researcher turns to half the room and says, "This man was a hero. During World War II, he led an underground movement that saved thousands of people from the Nazis, helping them escape to freedom." Then he asks the students what they see in his face. They describe him as warm, kind. His eyes look gentle and caring. They see a hero. Now here's where it gets interesting. The researcher turns to the other half of the room, who haven't heard any of this, shows them the exact same photograph, and says, "This man was a high-ranking Nazi war criminal, responsible for some of the most gruesome medical experiments ever performed on human beings." He asks them what they see: cold, cruel, empty eyes, a sinister expression. They see a monster. But the photograph never changed. The man's expression stayed exactly the same. So what actually changed? The story that came before it, the frame that was built around the picture. This experiment reveals something fascinating and a little unsettling about human nature. We don't just see with our eyes, we see with our minds. We don't react to facts themselves, but to the meaning we give those facts. And that meaning? It can be shaped, guided, and influenced in ways we rarely realize. This isn't just some interesting psychology party trick. It's the hidden reason why so many of our attempts to persuade others fall flat. Whether we're pitching an idea at work, negotiating with our parents, or trying to sell a product. We show up with our photograph, our set of facts, and we're baffled when the other person sees a monster while we see a hero. The world of professional sales knows this failure intimately. The profession is actually in crisis. Studies show that up to half of all salespeople in the United States fail to meet their minimum goals each year. Even more shocking, researchers who analyzed thousands of sales calls discovered that most of the behaviors salespeople use actually reduce their chances of making a sale. They're actively, unknowingly working against themselves. Why? Because for generations, selling has been treated as an art form, a game of guesswork, personality, and luck. It's been built on anecdotes, gut feelings, and outdated traditions passed down like folklore. But what if it's not an art at all? What if underneath it all, there's actually a science? That's the revolutionary premise of the book we're exploring today, The Science of Selling by David Hoffeld. This isn't just another collection of sales tips. It's a deep dive into the human brain, exploring the explosion of research in neuroscience, social psychology, and behavioral economics that has, for the first time in history, decoded how and why we make the decision to buy. By the end of our time together, you'll understand the hidden blueprint your brain uses to make every single purchasing choice. You'll learn why the old ways of persuading people are broken, and you'll get a new framework grounded in proven science that can make you profoundly more influential, not just in a career, but in every conversation you have. This is the secret to why people say yes. Our journey begins not in a laboratory, but in the middle of a friendly disagreement. David Hoffeld, a highly successful sales leader at the time, was chatting with an old colleague he respected. Let's call him Bill. They were discussing a simple strategy for building rapport with customers. David recommended a technique that had always worked wonders for him. To his surprise, Bill completely disagreed, called it an old gimmick, totally unreliable. David pushed back, sharing stories of his own success. Bill countered with stories of his own failures, using the exact same technique. David brought up salespeople he'd trained, who swore by it. Bill recalled people he'd trained who got terrible results. They were at a complete standstill. Both were smart, both were successful, and both were absolutely convinced they were right. And in that moment, a profound realization hit David. Their entire argument, and actually, the entire foundation of the sales profession, was built on sand. They were each using their own personal experiences as proof. Their evidence was nothing more than stories. it was all completely subjective. There was no objective truth they could point to. What if everything he thought he knew about selling was wrong? Or, at the very least, what if it was only right some of the time? In a world where your career and income depend on being right, that wasn't good enough. This realization sent him on a nearly decade-long quest. He decided to start over, to discard every idea he had about selling. He adopted a simple, powerful belief. If he could discover why and how the human brain makes a decision to buy something, he could use that as his guide. He would stop focusing on how to sell and start focusing on how people buy. He dove into the science, everything from social psychology, which studies how we influence each other, to cognitive neuroscience, which looks at how our brains process thoughts and emotions. And what he found was revolutionary. The study of persuasion was no longer some ethereal art, it had become a science. And this science revealed two fundamental truths that would change everything. First, influence doesn't happen in just one way. It happens in two. Think of it like an airplane. For a plane to fly, it needs two wings. If you only have one, you're never getting off the ground. In persuasion, these two wings are called the central route and the peripheral route of influence. The central route is the message itself, the logic, the data, the reasoning. It's the substance of your argument. When someone is persuaded through the central route, their decision is strong, long-lasting, and resistant to change. They've thought it through, and they're committed. But we all know people aren't purely logical creatures. That's where the second wing comes in, the peripheral route. This includes all the factors outside of the message itself. Things like how likable the speaker is, their credibility, or the emotions they evoke. This route relies on mental shortcuts, what scientists call heuristics. These are the brain's rules of thumb that allow it to make fast decisions without having to think too hard. And these shortcuts are everywhere, guiding our behavior in ways we rarely notice. Have you ever walked past two restaurants, one bustling with people and the other completely empty? You instinctively feel the crowded one must be better. That's a heuristic called social proof. We assume that if lots of other people are doing something, it must be the right thing to do. Or think about the power of anchoring. There's a famous story about a young Girl Scout who was interviewed by Johnny Carson after she broke the record for selling the most cookies. Carson asked her for her secret. She replied, "I would ask people if they would give a $30,000 donation to the Girl Scouts." Carson, laughing, asked what they said. "They all said no," she replied. "But then I would ask them, well, would you at least buy a box of Girl Scout cookies?" After considering a $30,000 donation, a few dollars for cookies felt like nothing. The first number, the anchor, changed her customers' perception of the second. This effect is so powerful that in one study, researchers asked people to write down the last two digits of their Social Security number. Then they asked them how much they would be willing to pay for various items, like a bottle of wine or a box of chocolates. Incredibly, people with higher Social Security numbers were willing to pay up to 300% more than those with lower ones. The number was completely random, but it anchored their perception of value. These peripheral cues, likability, authority, scarcity, social proof, are incredibly persuasive in the short term. But Hoffeld discovered that most salespeople were trying to fly the plane with only this one wing. They focused all their energy on being liked, on building rapport, and on creating a sense of urgency. But their core message, the central route, was weak or non-existent. This leads to flimsy commitments. A customer might say yes in the moment because they like the salesperson, but the next day when a competitor calls, their resolve crumbles. The decision wasn't rooted in logic, so it didn't stick. To be truly influential, you need both wings of the plane. You need a powerful peripheral game, yes, but it must be used to deliver an equally powerful central message. And this led Hoffeld to the most important question of his entire quest. What is the central message? If you're not just supposed to talk about your product's features, what are you supposed to talk about? The answer, he discovered, was the holy grail of selling. The central message isn't about you or your product. It's a series of ideas that perfectly mirrors the mental journey a buyer's brain goes through when it decides to make a purchase. After years of analyzing thousands of sales calls, both successful and unsuccessful, and cross-referencing his findings with decades of cognitive science, Hoffeld decoded that journey. He found that before any person makes a buying decision, their brain must get a satisfactory yes to 6 specific, sequential questions. He calls them the 6 whys. These 6 whys are the building blocks of every single buying decision, from choosing a brand of cereal to signing a multi-million-dollar deal. If a salesperson can successfully guide a buyer to a yes on all 6, the final sale becomes the natural, logical next step. But if even one why is left unanswered, the entire process stalls and the sale is lost. So what are they? The first and most formidable hurdle is why number 1, why change? Every salesperson thinks their main competition is another company. But Hoffeld reveals that your biggest competitor isn't another person at all. It's the status quo. The human brain is wired with a powerful status quo bias. We prefer to keep things the way they are, because change feels risky and requires energy. As the saying goes, it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't. Therefore, the first job of anyone trying to influence another person is not to sell a solution, but to sell the problem. Unless you can give your potential customer a compelling reason to change, they simply won't. You have to help them understand the true cost of inaction. You have to make their current problems hurt enough that the idea of staying the same becomes more painful than the idea of changing. Once someone is convinced they need to change, their brain immediately asks the next question. Why, number 2, why now? Everyone is a master of procrastination. We know we should go to the gym, we know we should start saving for retirement, but we can always do it tomorrow. Urgency is the antidote to procrastination. However, most people try to create urgency by applying pressure, which totally backfires. It triggers a psychological reflex called reactance. Our instinctive desire to resist when we feel our freedom to choose is being threatened. If you've ever had a pushy salesperson try to force you into a decision, you know that feeling. Your walls go up immediately. The science shows a better way. In one study, researchers had people ask strangers for money. The request worked about 10% of the time. But when they added a simple 9-word phrase at the end, compliance shot up by nearly 400%. The phrase was, "But you are free to accept or to refuse." This simple acknowledgement of their autonomy lowered their defenses and made them far more open to the request. Creating true urgency isn't about pressure. It's about helping the buyer understand why acting now is in their best interest, while always empowering them to feel in control of the decision. Next comes why number 3, why your industry solution. This is what Hoffeld calls the silent sales assassin, because so many people overlook it. Before a buyer decides on your specific company or product, they have to be sold on your entire category of solution. For example, if you're selling sophisticated software for company training, your customer could just buy a book, or hire a consultant, or just have one of their employees teach everyone else. Your competition isn't just other software companies. It's every other possible path they could take, including a do-it-yourself approach. You have to be able to clearly articulate why your type of solution is superior to all the other alternatives they might be considering. Once they're sold on your industry, they move to why number 4, why you and your company. This is all about trust. Think of trust and risk as being on opposite ends of a seesaw. When trust goes up, the perceived risk of making a decision goes down. Without trust, even the most logical proposal will feel dangerous. So how do you build it? The science points to 2 key pillars: demonstrating expertise and communicating confidence. You show expertise by offering valuable insights that help the buyer think about their problem in a new way. You're not just a vendor, you're a valued resource. You communicate confidence not through arrogance, but through your firm belief in the value you provide, which is often conveyed more through your nonverbal cues and tone of voice than your actual words. Only after they trust you and your company does their brain finally turn to why. Number 5. Why your product or service. Now, you might think this is where you list all your features and benefits. But Hoffeld warns this is a trap. Buyers don't care about your features. They care about their problems. The key here is not to list everything your product can do, but to identify what he calls distinct value. Distinct value has two components. It must be something that truly matters to that specific buyer, and it must be something that your competitors cannot offer. It's the unique intersection of their need and your solution. By focusing only on the distinct value, you transform your pitch from a generic laundry list into a tailored, compelling argument that speaks directly to their world. Finally, after all 5 of those questions have been answered, the brain arrives at the final gatekeeper. Why? Number 6. Why spend the money? Every yes to one thing is a no to something else. When a company decides to invest in your software, they're also deciding not to invest in that new piece of machinery or those new marketing campaigns. The money could always go somewhere else. To get past this final hurdle, you have to connect your solution to one of the 2 most powerful triggers of human behavior, the desire for gain and the fear of loss. The fear of loss is particularly potent. Groundbreaking research by Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman proved that for most people, the pain of losing is psychologically about twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining. He demonstrated this with a famous experiment. He presented people with a hypothetical scenario. A deadly disease is expected to kill 600 people. They were given 2 options. Option A saves 200 people for sure. Option B has a 1/3 probability that all 600 will be saved, and a 2/3 probability that no one will be saved. The vast majority of people chose option A, the safe bet. Then he presented the same scenario to a new group, but framed the options differently. Option C guarantees that 400 people will die. Option D has a 1/3 probability that nobody will die, and a 2/3 probability that 600 people will die. In this case, the majority of people chose option D, the risky bet. But look closely. Option A and C are identical. Option B and D are identical. The only thing that changed was the wording. When the choice was framed around gains, saving people, people were risk-averse. But when it was framed around losses, people dying, they became risk-seeking. To answer why spend the money, you have to help your buyer see the purchase not as a cost, but as the only way to achieve a desired gain, or even more powerfully, to avoid a painful loss. Now, understanding these 6 whys is one thing, but how do you actually guide a conversation through them? Hoffeld explains that the engine that drives this entire process is the art and science of asking powerful questions. Many sales methodologies teach salespeople to use complex categories of questions, problem questions, implication questions, and so on. But this is hopelessly complicated. When you're trying to remember which category to use next, you stop listening. The science of how we communicate, known as social penetration theory, shows that the brain naturally discloses information in layers, like peeling an onion. You start on the surface and gradually go deeper. Therefore, your questions should follow the same pattern. Hoffeld simplifies this into 3 levels. First-level questions are about facts and situations. What software are you currently using? Or how many people are on your team? They open up a topic. Second-level questions go deeper, asking for explanations and assessments. Why did you choose that software in the first place? Or, what's the most challenging part of managing a team that size? These questions prompt buyers to think through their situation, and studies at Harvard have shown that when people state their own opinions, it activates the reward centers in their brain. They actually enjoy answering these questions. Third-level questions go to the heart of the matter. They uncover the emotions, the desire for gain, and the fear of loss that are driving the decision. If you could solve that management challenge, what would that mean for you personally? Or, if this problem continues, how will it impact your department's goals for the year? By moving through these 3 levels, You don't just gather information. You guide the buyer on a journey of self-discovery, helping them connect the dots and build the business case for change themselves. Finally, Hoffeld tackles one of the most mythologized parts of selling, the close. He uses the famous candle problem to illustrate how we get stuck. In the puzzle, you're given a candle, a box of tacks, and matches, and told to attach the candle to the wall. Most people try to tack the candle directly to the wall or melt it, but they fail. They suffer from functional fixedness. They see the box only as a container for the tacks. The solution is to empty the box, tack the box to the wall, and place the candle inside it. In the same way, salespeople have functional fixedness about closing. They see it as one big high-pressure event that happens at the end of the sale. But the science shows this is completely wrong. A positive buying decision isn't one big commitment. It's the result of a series of small, strategic commitments made along the way. It's the yeses to the 6 whys. A classic study perfectly illustrates this. Researchers went door to door in a neighborhood, asking people to put a massive, ugly "Drive Carefully" billboard in their front yard. Only 17% agreed. But in a nearby neighborhood, a staggering 76% agreed to the exact same request. Why the huge difference? Because 2 weeks earlier, that second group had been asked to put a tiny 3-inch sign in their window that read, "Be a safe driver." That small initial commitment changed their self-perception. They began to see themselves as the kind of people who support safe driving. So when the larger request came, they acted consistently with their new identity. This is the real secret to closing. It isn't a technique you use at the end. It's a process of gaining small commitments, trial closes, throughout the entire conversation. You don't ask for the sale. You lead the buyer to the inevitable conclusion that the sale is the right decision, because they've already agreed to every premise it's built upon. The final yes is just a formality. Ultimately, the science of selling isn't about tricks or manipulation. It's about empathy. It's about understanding that the people you're talking to have a brain that works in a predictable way. By aligning your communication with that natural process, you're not tricking them. You're making it easier for them to understand, to feel confident, and to make good decisions. You are, in the truest sense of the word, serving them. When you step back and look at the ideas in the science of selling, what becomes clear is that this book is about so much more than just sales. It's a masterclass in human influence and communication. David Hoffeld has taken what can feel like a mysterious, intimidating process and broken it down into a clear, predictable, and most importantly, ethical framework. The most powerful lesson, for me, is the shift in focus from selling to serving. The old model of sales was often adversarial. It was about persuasion tactics, overcoming objections, and getting someone to do something. But this new science-based model is collaborative. It's about deeply understanding another person's world, their problems, their fears, their aspirations, and guiding them to a solution that will genuinely make their life better. It reframes the salesperson not as a predator, but as a trusted guide. And that's a lesson that applies far beyond a formal sales call. Whether you're a student trying to convince your group to go with your idea for a project, a young professional pitching a new initiative to your boss, or even just trying to be a better friend or partner, these principles are universal. The need to understand another person's perspective, to build trust, to help them see a problem clearly, and to guide them toward a positive change, that is the foundation of all effective human interaction. So how can you start applying this in your own life right now? Here are 3 simple actions you can take. First, the next time you find yourself in a situation where you need to influence someone, consciously stop yourself from planning what you want to say. Instead, take a moment and try to answer the 6 whys from their point of view. Why should they change what they're currently doing? Why is it urgent for them to act now? What are their other options? By stepping into their shoes first, you will approach the conversation with a level of empathy and understanding that is instantly disarming and profoundly effective. Second, practice asking second-level questions. Our daily conversations tend to stay on the surface, at level 1. We ask, "How was your day?" and accept "fine" as the answer. Start going one layer deeper. When a friend tells you about a problem, instead of immediately offering a solution, try asking a gentle question like, "That sounds tough. What's the most frustrating part about that for you?" Or, "Why do you think that's so important to solve?" You will be amazed at how this simple shift transforms the quality and depth of your connections with people. Third, start noticing the science of influence in the world around you. When you see an advertisement, ask yourself, what anchors are they using? Are they appealing to social proof? Are they trying to tap into my fear of loss or desire for gain? When you watch a politician give a speech, notice how they build their central message while also using peripheral cues. You will begin to see that these principles are not abstract theories. They are the invisible architecture of our social world. And once you can see the architecture, you are no longer just a passive observer. You become a participant who understands the rules. That was a summary of The Science of Selling by David Hoffeld. We've covered the core framework today, but a summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful city. The map can show you the layout, the key landmarks, and the best route to take, but it can't give you the feeling of walking the streets, smelling the food from the cafes, or hearing the music in the air. The real magic of this book lies in the details, the specific examples, and the way the ideas build on one another. This summary is your map, designed to help you decide if this journey is one you want to take. If anything we've discussed has sparked your curiosity, I truly encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning techniques. It's about fundamentally upgrading your ability to connect with and serve other people. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to click that subscribe button. It lets me know that this work matters to you, and it ensures you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book. Let's keep learning and growing together.